All right. Welcome everyone to today's 2024 legislative session kickoff with Friends of Family Farmers. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Alice Morrison. I am our co-executive director of policy and development, and I'm joined here today by our community engagement manager, Brittany Deming, and we're going to go over, here's today's agenda. We have session timeline. We're going to talk briefly about FOF's priorities and then how to get involved and how to stay informed, because as we'll see in the timeline, we are going into our short session in our biennial legislative calendar. That means that the session is about 35 days long, about 5 weeks-ish, and things move fast during that time. So I am preparing myself for a whirlwind, and I hope to give you all the dates, deadlines, and some background to help manage expectations and know when the best times to jump in will be. So the first thing we're going to talk about today, and also before we get started, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Brittany will monitor that. And then we are going to have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you put it in chat, we'll make sure we get to it, and we'll also have time for folks to come off mute and talk with us at the end of the presentation. So session timeline. All right, so the session officially begins February 5th. That is a Sunday. No, it's Monday. It's very soon. That is what we will say. So February 5th is the beginning of session. The first chamber, and just as a reminder, first chamber means whichever chamber the bill is introduced in, not necessarily only House or only Senate, but where the bill originates. All bills that are assigned to policy committees, we'll cover what that means in a second, must have a work session posted. They don't have to have completed their work session, but they have to have a work session posted by February 12th. That is only 1 week into session. So those deadlines come at you fast when we're talking about the short session. And then that work session has to be completed and a vote taken in the policy committee by February 19th. Again, 1 more week. So then that bill will presumably go to the floor of its first chamber for a vote to go to its second chamber or to another subsequent committee that we'll talk about in a second. And then some more deadlines for the second chamber. So once this bill has been passed out of its first chamber, according to these deadlines, it must have a work session posted by February 23rd, and it must be voted on in that second policy committee in the second chamber by February 29th. Then our sine die, which is a Latin term, which means the end, well, it means something specific, but to us, it's the constitutional end of session here in Oregon. So that is when business must be concluded. And that for this session is March 10th. So session opens February 5th, and absolutely everything has to be done by March 10th. So when we talk about first and second chamber deadlines, we're only talking about bills that are assigned to policy committees. And these chamber deadlines do not apply to bills that are in the Rules, Revenue, and Ways and Means committees. Those committees just need to complete their work by the sine die. Obviously, they have to go to floor votes after those committees. So it can't just happen on the sine die. They also have to have floor votes. But they are not beholden to these specific first and second chamber deadlines. So that's an overall view of what we're looking at in the next 5 weeks. And so what's going to happen in between? Like how do we move through these deadlines? Mostly with committees. So these are the draft committee schedules. These TBAs are just which meeting room they're going to be held in. It's not going to change the time, most likely. This is what we know right now. And the ones that I want us to pay attention to for the Senate, where our issues usually land, are in the Natural Resources and Wildfire Recovery Committee and possibly the Rules Committee. So when we talk about Senate bills, thinking about when we ask you for testimony, these, if you're choosing to give oral testimony, these committee times will not change. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, either very early in the morning or that 3 to 4:30 p.m. If it's a Senate committee. And then also, whoops, well, cat's out of the bag. We pay attention to the Agriculture Committee in the House. That's not a surprise. They also have Tuesday and Thursday meetings at that 3 to 4:30 p.m. slot. Again, these TBAs are just the meeting room number. And wanted to point out that there's also a Rules Committee in the House. And that one meets again on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. And so when we send out all our action alerts, and I know most of you probably heard about this kickoff webinar through our action alert system, and we're going to talk about how important that is later. But these times are going to be our targets for when the bills that we care about most are discussed and when we have the opportunity to give feedback on them. And then joint committees. So really, we're concerned with the Ways and Means Committee, and that is, Ways and Means is just how we talk about funding. Ways and Means is all about money allocations. So when we discuss Ways and Means subcommittees, we're usually talking about the Natural Resources Subcommittee. That is where budgets for agencies related to agriculture and natural resource management go, as well as where a lot of the any of the requests that we have for general funds that are related to agriculture and conservation and most of the things that FOF works on, we pay special attention to the Joint Ways and Means Committee on Natural Resources. And that meets on Monday, 1 to 2:30, and Wednesday, 1 to 2:30. So just giving folks a heads up on when we might ask you to jump in if you're willing to raise your voice on the issues that we're going to work on this session. And another reminder, we got some short timelines here. And I know that we do have some help this session. Again, just like last session, some of you probably got calls from our session organizers telling you about testimony deadlines and when you have the opportunity to give input. And we really apologize that we're not giving you very much time to get these things done. And that's because we haven't been given very much time by the legislature. Sometimes we get 48 to 72 hours notice, but 24 hours is very common for notice for committee agendas. And especially in the short session, there are some rules about how this goes. And I won't go into the details of like legally what they're required to do, because they can vote to suspend those rules and limit it to a 24-hour notice. So that's very, very common. And we apologize that we don't have more time to help folks get ready for those or to accommodate those. I promise that it's not us trying to disrespect your schedule. It's just the way that the legislature works. But now that I told you when things are going to happen, now I will give you a brief synopsis of what things are going to happen. And I want to preface this section with the final text of the bills has not yet been released. For those of you all who are familiar with the OLIS system, which we are going to do a little demo of later in this kickoff extravaganza, we are going to see the text of the bills that will be debated in the first part of the session or will be proposed amendments or what have you. That introduced text is not going to be posted until 10 p.m. on Wednesday, January 31st. So you'll see this in on our OLIS demo, but that is the date and time that I've been given when all of those things will be finalized. And so I'm not going to be sharing any draft language of bills with you, because we can have a lot of opinions about the draft language, but we don't know if that is going to be what we will have to react to in the session. So I'm going to talk about our priorities as in our the principles that we're standing on when it comes to these topics we're going to be debating in the legislature this year. So, all right. So we're back again with specialty seed protections, also known as the Willamette Valley Protected District or the canola bill or all of those things. We are focusing on the specialty seed protections here at FOF because those are the types of farmers that we represent around the state. For a little bit of background, this has been going on for over a decade, probably 15 years. And the Willamette Valley Protected District is a rectangular region in the Willamette Valley where there are restrictions on certain crops that can interfere with the production of brassica specialty seeds in this area. We are incredibly lucky to have a thriving brassica seed growing industry here in the valley. And especially when it comes to organic brassica seed, that can be an incredibly lucrative pathway for small acreage farmers like the ones that FOF represents. It's possible, there was a study conducted last year, an economic viability study conducted by Highland Economics. We can put all of these resources in the follow-up to this meeting, but showed that in a lot of cases, you can generate tens of thousands of dollars per acre of revenue growing specialty brassica seeds, especially if they're organic, compared to a few $100s per acre of revenue from crops like canola. Canola is also a brassica and is incredibly pernicious when it comes to crossing with other types of seeds out in the field, and very, very good at making its genetic presence known and asserted and ruining that seed lot for the seed it was supposed to be grown through. So this problem has been regulated through acreage limitations of canola in the Willamette Valley Protected District by ODA in the past. And we sought last session, we sought to make those limitations permanent. That, however, was met with a lot more resistance than had it been in the past from the canola growing industry, and some powerful stakeholders therein. So our bill to make existing policy permanent was amended at the last moment to make no changes to the current situation except to extend the sunset by 1 year, meaning that the sunset for those regulations will come July 1 of this year. So that is obviously unacceptable. We want to maintain protection so people can grow the specialty seeds that turn into millions of pounds of food for people around the globe. And there was a work group convened at ODA in the interim that started last summer in August and met consistently, well, somewhat consistently, all the way up through the beginning of the year. So there has been a lot of discussion and not a lot of agreement in that working group. It was comprised of specialty seed farmers. Thank you especially to Hank Keogh and Sarah Klieger, organic advocates like Amy Wong, who's on the call today, the Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association. There were canola growers present. Oregon Farm Bureau was there, and Oregon Board of Ag Chair Elin Miller, who is the chair of the ODA advisory board, but does not have direct experience growing canola. And I neglected to put it on this list, but there also were 2 OSU scientists present on this advisory work group to try to find a solution. There obviously a solution was not clearly found, or I would be presenting it to you today. And I wanted to lay out FOF's priorities for this. The House Ag Committee has decided that this is their issue. They're taking hold of it, and Chair Helm is devoting a committee bill to this issue. And our top priorities for this bill are a clear pinning system requirement and licensing program for brassica seed growers. This one does seem to have agreement because this only functions if everyone who is growing vulnerable brassica seed in the valley uses the same system, and we know where folks are, so we know the cross-contamination risks are. We also need strong protections for organic growers from possible GMO canola contamination. And we want isolation distances enshrined in law so that they cannot be limited in the future by changes of rules or anything like that. Beyond that, we will be talking a lot about this bill and giving a lot of specifics once the text is, the introduced text is released, but I don't want to preemptively tell you anything is good or bad because this bill, the negotiations have gone right up until the session has started. So look out for more. Woo! Next is the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. So what this is a funding program that is administered through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, or OWEB, which has 4 components. This program was authorized in 2017, but was not funded until 2021. So it's only had 1 round of its programs funded. And the programs that we're most excited about are conservation program matching funds, which would help people create conservation management plans for their land and then provide matching funds required for other programs like NRCS programs or watershed council programs, or any of those programs to protect the whole ecosystem of your farm, but require upfront matching funds. The Oregon Ag Heritage Program can fill that gap for folks trying to do right by their ecosystem. It also provides funding for conservation easements on working lands. These are addendums to the deed of a property that are in perpetuity. They cannot be undone and dictate the activities and use of that land going forward. So this is a way for farmers who want to make sure that the land that they're currently controlling and stewarding stays in production for the rest of ad nauseum, actually. So just forever. It is a permanent change to the deed of the property of what things can be done there. Essentially, it takes the logging or mineral mining or development rights, assigns a number to those, and then the conservation easement pays that number to the current landowner. And then that easement essentially limits the activities on that land for the rest of time and allows that land to be sold at the lower agricultural only value. So essentially the conservation easement takes that package of rights of things you could do with that land, puts a quantifiable number on it from an appraiser, pays that difference to the current landholder, and then they can go ahead and subtract that amount from the purchase price of the land for the next owner, making land more accessible for the next generation of farmers who we know have been hamstrung by the incredible escalation of farmland prices here in Oregon. That's also, both of these things are eligible for federal match, which is really attractive. There are programs that we can bring down more money from the federal government. There is a huge amount of federal money right now for small farms, for regenerative farms, for community-focused farms. And we want to make sure that the farmers in Oregon who are doing those things and have been doing those things for decades are getting those resources that they deserve. And these programs are a way to do that. So last session, this program was left out of what we call the Christmas tree bill, the end of session funding package. That was a surprise to advocates like us who were assured that it would be included, and we weren't given a good reason why it wasn't included. And so this session, activists like the Oregon Agricultural Trust and FOF and others in the coalition have been working with the House Ag Committee. There is another committee bill for $10.8 million of funding for this program. And I think I'll take a moment to explain what a committee bill means. In a short session, let's back up. In a long session, there are no bill limits. Legislators and committees can introduce as many bills as they want. Legislators in a short session have a personal bill limit. I think it's 3. You cannot introduce more than 3 bills as an individual legislator. That means that you really have to prioritize, because the session is so short and there's no way that we would get to all of these policy concepts which means that the short session often becomes tying up loose ends or budget reallocations from the previous long session. There's technically no committee bill limit, although there are often gentlemen's agreements, which is a terrible term, but is used in the legislature about how many bills a committee can introduce. And I think it's supposed to be around 2 or 3, although you can have more, it's not illegal. But there has been a committee bill dedicated to the Organic Heritage Program in the House. Another House Ag Committee bill is the Canola Specialty Seed Protections Bill for the Willamette Valley Protected District. So this is something that we're monitoring closely. We are always looking for creative solutions to bring down the cost of farmland for the farmers that we serve and the next generation of farmers broadly, because it has been inaccessible for too long, and we see this as a pathway toward lower farmland prices and the protection of farmland in perpetuity. Speaking of farmland protections, we are also monitoring the governor's biggest priority. For those of you who have been following the legislature, Governor Kotek has made housing her top priority for this session, which is great. We agree we're in a housing crisis here in Oregon, but the bill that she has introduced, well, it's a reboot of a bill that she introduced last session, 3414. We don't have a new bill number yet for the new session, but the thing that worries us the most is the expansion of UGBs and the rezoning of farmland without a lot of evaluation or reasoning behind that. We agree that housing needs to be a priority for the state, but especially our farmland adjacent to metro areas is some of our most precious resources. Once farmland is converted to development, there is no way for us to go back. That farmland and those soils become degraded. You cannot change it back to agricultural land. And our best agricultural soils in the valley are a finite resource and should be protected in our opinion. We do want there to be a justification for UGB expansion into farmland, and we'd like to see prioritization within UGBs and incentives given to people repurposing land within UGBs that's closer to services, more accessible to public transportation, all of those wonderful things that the UGBs are supposed to do. We should be fully utilizing the land within the UGBs before permanently taking farmland out of production through rezoning and the expansion of those UGBs. So those are our top concerns, and we're continuing to monitor the situation. We do know that there's the governor's bill, and there are some alternative proposals out there. And this, I can admit, is an area of growth for FOF. We are not land use experts, and we have a lot of wonderful partner organizations who are helping us learn and grow in this way. And we will be issuing formal positions on the introduced text as it comes. So definitely monitoring this situation and really want to see these concerns addressed before we get behind or start formally opposing legislation that's out there.
Hey, Alice, can we just stop real quick and mention that UGB is an urban growth boundary?
Oh, yes. UGB is an urban growth boundary. It is a wonderful tool we have here in Oregon that essentially puts a ring around municipalities and says, this is the limit of development. And that's why when you're driving like down the I-5 corridor, why you it seems like you hit a wall, so to speak, and then all of a sudden you're in farmland. And that is a wonderful thing that is not unique to Oregon, but many other states don't have it. It prevents unfettered sprawl and helps us prioritize density in our urban areas so that we can maintain rural areas and food producing areas close to our urban centers, which in FOF's priorities also means that we're prioritizing the ability of community food systems to function close to each other. And that's a huge part of how it it makes our community food systems, our farmers markets, CSAs, all of those things function here in Oregon. It's a huge asset to us. So we want to preserve that. All right. And Sherilyn, thank you so much for your question. If you want to type it in chat, we can make sure we answer the questions in chat first during the question period, and we'll make sure we get to everyone. All right. So budget priorities. There is, in addition to the funding to make the specialty seed and Willamette Valley Protected District happen, we are very, and for the $10.8 million for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, we are also looking into some budget priorities and working with agencies to make sure these things are included. The first of those is $1 million additional funding for the Double Up Food Buck program. This is the SNAP matching program administered by the Farmers Market Fund here in Oregon. It's when you go to your farmers market. You can also use it at farm stands. You can use it on a CSA through the Pacific Northwest CSA Coalition. And there are some grocery stores that accept it as well, but it doubles your SNAP dollars up to $20. So if you run your card for $20, you actually get $40 of purchasing power for fresh fruits and vegetables, beans, mushrooms, that kind of thing. And it's a wonderful program that gets a lot of federal matching incentives. And for us to fully utilize the federal match and get the most for Oregonians, we need an additional $1 million from the state to tap into that fully. And then we are still supportive of the $800,000 or 4 FTE for the state meat inspection program at ODA. This was included in the original ODA budget in 2023 and was later taken out. The state meat inspection program is a program that is like a parallel to the USDA meat inspection program, but state meat inspection facilities only cater to farmers who are selling their meat within the boundary of Oregon. So that program is really vital for our community-oriented farmers who are, producing perhaps a smaller amount of livestock than large contract growers and cannot compete at our very, very limited USDA facilities across the state. And this is an essential tool to getting more facilities online and helping our farmers bring their product legally to market. And right now, that program does not have a single dedicated FTE at ODA. There is not funding that says specifically that a whole employee gets to work on that program. And we are really committed to the future that this state meat inspection program can bring us in terms of expanding pasture-based and community-focused livestock production in the state. But we need this program to get off the ground first. So this number could change based on what the agency requests, but we right now are flagging that this was the ask in 2023 and it was struck out of the budget, and we'd like to see it come back if the agency agrees. We've also heard talk about investments in cleaning up the lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area. That is the water crisis happening in Umatilla and Morrow counties. There's not been a number discussed with this, but we have heard that ODA, the Oregon Water Resource Department, and DEQ are all involved in these asks, and we fully support any and all budget things that come along with that, because that nitrate groundwater contamination, FOF was founded as an alternative to industrialized agriculture, and that crisis in Eastern Oregon specifically is connected to several factors, including the largest dairy in the state and the nitrate contamination that comes from having tens and tens of thousands of cows under one roof and the waste management that goes with that. We would really like to see our agencies get the resources they need to fully address this problem, to clean it up, and to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's a good reminder here that we have 2 other groundwater management areas in the state, one down in Malheur County and one that I happen to live in the South Willamette Valley. From Junction City up through Harrisburg-ish, there is a groundwater management area right here in the Willamette Valley. And a lot of people live there, including me. I drink well water from the groundwater management area every day. And this is an issue that impacts rural residents and farmers alike, and we need to invest in its mitigation and prevention. All right, so I'm going to talk very briefly about how you can get involved, and then we will go to questions because I'm sure you have so many after I told you so much information. So thank you all for bearing with me. So to get involved in this session, you should, of course, take the FOF biennial survey. Brittany's going to put this link in the chat, but I just wanted to say that this is how we determine our legislative priorities. All those things that I just listed that we're monitoring and that we are getting behind and working on and mobilizing people, it's because we've had support for them in our biennial survey process over the last decade. And we are also doing focus groups. There's some regional focus groups, some partner run focus groups. Reach out to Brittany for more info on that. Some of them are full though, so please take the survey first. And if it's not mentioned in this feedback, we won't work on it. We have very limited capacity and we have to do what is top priority for our farmers. And this survey is one of the biggest ways that we determine that. So if you are out there and you're like, wow, there's this problem or this thing that's holding my farm back, it's holding my community back, and I want FOF to take action in it, the first step is getting involved by taking this survey and making sure that that's recorded so that we can fall back on it and count it as a priority of our farmers across the state. This survey is open until March 15th, and it gives us a lot of information about what's important to you that we use during the session, and it will also determine our priorities for the 2025 session. So number one thing, take the survey. It's so important. All right. And then sign up for our action alerts. We will give you as much notice as possible about opportunities for testimony. I do want to highlight that the state legislature is still doing in-person and virtual testimony options, so you do not have to drive to Salem in order to testify. You do sometimes have to sit through an entire hour-and-a-half hearing to get your 2 minutes to share, but that is better than if you for example, live in Burns or something and making that 9-10 hour drive to Salem and then sitting there for an hour-and-a-half to speak for 2 minutes or not even get the chance to speak. So virtual testimony is welcome. It is important, and we would love to have you in any way that you can participate. We will have testimony instructions like how do you register and all of that, and templates with talking points for you to choose from, as well as like making sure that you're entering your name and everything correctly for the record so you are counted. And that will all be on our website in the advocacy menu as the session progresses. So make sure you're signed up for those action alerts. And when you're signing up, they're like, oh, what am I interested in? And there's some topics listed, like there's specialty seed and canola listed there. There's land use, there's all kinds of stuff. So if you want to make sure that you receive the alerts on that topic in particular, sign up for that. And we have the ability to like section you off. The other thing I want to say is that we really, really, really need you to enter the address where you are registered to vote when you sign up, because there are some opportunities where we can only have people in a specific district speaking to a legislator. So if that is possible for you when you sign up to enter the address where you're registered to vote, that is the best way to get the most appropriate action alerts for your area. And if you don't enter an address when you sign up, you will only receive statewide alerts, which there are plenty of those, but there are even more that are related specifically to the district that you're in, and that's always super helpful. Okay, so now I am going to stop sharing right now, and let's take some questions real quick before we do a good old OLIS walkthrough where I show you the Oregon Legislative Information System.
All right. So Alice, somebody has a question about the slide before the priority budgets.
Yeah.
And they wanted to go back and look at the slide while asking the question.
Oh, sure.
That's okay.
Right before the budget, so the land use slide.
I believe so.
Let me share my screen.
If Sherilyn, is that how you pronounce your name? If you can unmute.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, that's how most people say my name. Hey everyone, thank you for that. This is my first time joining your information session, so happy to be here and learn as much as my brain can absorb. So UGB, Alice?
Yes.
Okay, you said you ended that portion by saying that FOFF will continue to monitor, you know, what they'll do for the expansion. Um, what can you do as far as proactively, taking up space at these about this, like because so often I see, you know, like it's kind of too late, right? Like the legislature, the state, the city have already made decisions, and then we're just kind of left with that. And then organizations like us, a community-based organization that's also a grassroots like yourself, um, just have to work with it. So could you, if there is anything more that you guys are doing behind the scenes, what would you like us to know about that? Just to kind of let us know that, you're not just that you are monitoring it, and that perhaps there is an opportunity to influence, provide input before anything is finalized about the UGB expansion into farmlands.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. So the main thing that we're doing right now is by monitoring this bill. There is a specific bill that is coming to the legislature, and again, I've seen a draft of it, but I haven't seen the final text. But we are the best thing that you can do that applies to absolutely everyone is submitting testimony opposing anything that would have just unrestricted expansions of UGBs without any qualifications in the bill that's coming forward, because that would grant new powers to municipalities to expand their urban growth boundaries. And that hasn't happened yet. There are some things that are happening already at the county level that there are certain county powers that can be granted to annex additional land. And we're monitoring those on a local basis. I know a group of farmers in Washington County in the North Plains and Hillsborough area has reached out to us, and we're helping them organize for action at the county level. If that's something that folks are interested in, or currently fighting a new county ordinance or a county decision that would change cities' ability to annex, or would just decide to annex land, we can definitely help you organize around that and make sure that you're showing up at the right hearings, that you're not missing any comment periods, that you're flooding the offices that need to hear from you with the right messages. But right now, this legislation that's coming, obviously, I want to say again, it's a draft. I don't want to say that it's good or bad, but the thing that we want to be clear on is that if there's no justification needed for UGB expansion into farmland, that is likely not something that FOF will ever support, because there needs to be an assessment done. And the thing that we can really lean on now is that is simply a proposal at this moment. And if a bill like that passes, then the cities would still have to decide to take advantage of it, and you could lobby your city council or take action at a local level. But we're trying to prevent that from happening, where people are then having to fight many small fights when we can just fight a big fight right now.
Can I
Yeah.
say something
Yeah,
about that? There are no hearing rights in this new bill, which is the governor's bill, which is Senate Bill 1537. There will probably be a hearing on the Senate side February 8th, and we have to kill that on the Senate side. Everything's going to be moving quickly. There will be no hearing rights for people, and even these things that you listed on the right-hand side of that slide, that they need justification and blah, blah, blah. That's in there already. And it lasts for 10 years and it's full of loopholes. So we just want to get that whole thing about expedited UGB out of that bill completely. They need to build up, not out. And this will be the third time in 2 years that this governor and this legislature is messing with the urban growth boundary. Last session, they passed Senate Bill 70, which allows housing developments on EFU in Malheur. Senate Bill 4, which allows massive supersiding by the governor of thousands of acres for polluting semiconductor plants, and now this. So they are chipping away badly at our urban growth boundary system and our land use system. And I do want people to know that they can, that there is a movie being shown around the state now made by a local nurseryman called An Oregon Story. You can go to anoregonstory.com and see a trailer and also see where it's playing, because it will explain the whole history of our land use laws, all the blood, sweat, and tears it took to create our land use laws and to retain them. So we've been going to those, and people are being given action alerts now to hurry up and write to their legislator, plus the governor, plus Senator Wagner, about getting this UGB section out completely of that bill. Thanks.
Thank you, Eileen. And yes, I agree that even if those words, the justification for UGB expansion, we're looking for true justification. And if they're right now, the things that I've seen, I agree with you that there are loopholes in there. And that's not what we're looking for. So we maintain that those things, although they might be in there in name, are not true justification or true incentives to use the land within the UGB. And until those things are there, I'm being cautious in my words, because we don't have an official position statement on our website reacting to the introduced text. And I don't want to jump the gun.
Right.
But I want to assure you that monitoring is not a true characterization of what FOF is doing on this issue. We are much more active than that, but at this moment, we don't have an official position listed because the introduced text has not been publicly released. So
right, and I'm very pleased that Friends of Family Farmers is taking an interest in this as one of your priorities. Very pleased.
And again, we're not alone in this. We have some wonderful partners within a coalition that we're a part of called the Oregon Conservation Network. We are members of the OCN and Thousand Friends of Oregon, who we don't always agree with Thousand Friends on everything that they do, but in this we are very much aligned in wanting to preserve farmland and our vital, high quality agricultural soils within population corridors. So
great, good.
Yeah.
That was actually the next question about Thousand Friends of Oregon and where it fits in with this partnership about UGBs. I think maybe that answered the question. I don't know if you want to expand on our partnership with Thousand Friends.
Thousand Friends and FOF have been in similar spaces for a long time, and we agree on a lot of farmland preservation things. I think that the place where we have diverged in the past is in the diversification of farm revenue for agritourism. But this has nothing to do with agritourism.
Right.
So we are,
I get it.
Because we have we're very excited to keep folks in the loop on this issue and to make sure that rural residents and folks who are agricultural producers have a strong voice in this process. And that's the role that we play for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving on. So is FOF involved with the raw milk issues? Farmers have lost their insurance because of big milk producers are pressuring insurers over this issue. Is there anything happening in the legislative session coming up?
So yes, we are involved in the raw milk issue. We introduced a bill 2616 last session that would have been an expansion of sales outlets of the current exempt use farmers and the introduction of a licensing program with accompanying safety standards for raw milk producers to grow into a licensed space and be able to sell retail. That bill was killed during the session. So we are definitely still monitoring the situation. And I know we have one of our raw milk farmers on the call today who's just launched a lawsuit against ODA for a CAFO program expansion that they've proposed to try to impose CAFO program restrictions on 2-cow dairies. Unfortunately, there is no bill within the 2024 session that's related to this issue. But what I will say is that we are very much looking forward to restarting that conversation over the summer and in 2025. So definitely still on our radar, really grateful to all the folks doing the good work out there. And although there's nothing going on this session, that conversation is definitely not over.
Okay, moving on from the comment about having wonderful partners, any chance you were partners with EcoTrust and orgs and farmers in their network of programs and involved orgs?
Yeah, we mostly partner with EcoTrust on our program side. I know that they recently joined our community of practice and the Capital Assistance for Local Farmers network that is one of our newest projects funded by the USDA, which launched in November. But we have been in good communication with EcoTrust on many of our programs. And we are very, very active members of the Oregon Community Food Systems Network, which is how we, through the policy committee at the OCFSN, is how we most often relate to our partner organizations who are working with specific geographic or culturally specific farmer populations around the state. In addition to, the 1,600 farmers that are in our network who also are part of some of those other regional or culturally specific networks. So definitely doing our best to stay in touch with everyone, and really grateful to the Oregon Community Food Systems Network for helping us with their platform to bring everyone together.
Thank you.
I thought maybe you could get into why do we even get involved in advocacy? I don't think we touched on that so far.
Yeah. I kind of came into this thinking, oh, you all know about FOF. I don't have to say that. But Friends of Family Farmers is we were founded in 2005. And we were founded as a group of concerned farmers and rural neighbors in Lynn County, actually, who were concerned about the policy situation regarding agriculture and felt that their voices were being drowned out by conventional commodity agriculture trade groups. So we have always been in the room with agencies and with county governments and local governments and the state government, and always been for the past, oh my gosh, it's been 18 years now. We're almost 20. That's wild. Oh, FOF can vote this year. How fitting. So FOF for the last 18 years has been the group in the room who raises their hand and says, well, what about small producers? Or what about organic producers? Or what about all of these things? And making sure that along with our partners, obviously, who work with similar groups, but we have been one of the leading policy voices for this type of farmer. We identify our farmers as small and mid-sized, highly diversified and local market farmers. So the kind of folks who are growing a very diversified group of crops, often incorporating livestock and selling their produce or meat or products in general direct, at least through one direct-to-consumer sales outlet. So CSA, farm stand, to local restaurants, to the farmer's market, the kind of folks that when you buy the food, you're buying it from the person who grew it. And so those types of farmers come to us and tell us through our survey and focus group process, they tell us what's most important to them, what's holding them back, or what opportunities they think we should capitalize on and get more funding or more attention or more media onto things to make sure that we are chipping away at the notion that there's only one way that farmers think. So our farmers, over the course of those 18 years, you can head over to our website to see our policy wins. But we've also realized that some of these, we have to help people deal with the system as it is now, in addition to changing the system moving forward, which is why we now also operate Oregon Farm Link, which is a land access program for farmers around the state, and the Oregon Pasture Network, which is a community of practice for pasture-based livestock producers. And as I said, in November, we launched the Capital Assistance for Local Farmers project. We're in the planning stages of that USDA-funded project to help better connect government and private sector funders with small and mid-sized, highly diversified and local market farmers who don't tend to see themselves in many conventional ag financing products. So that is FOF. Sorry for not giving the overview earlier.
And I think it's also really important to talk about whose testimony is super important to the legislators.
That is so true. So I mentioned earlier that there are times when we only contact people from a specific district, and I can stop my share since we're not specifically talking about land use right now. But sometimes we contact people from only a specific district, and sometimes we contact people only who have marked themselves as farmers in our system, because it's really, really important that the legislature hears from the people most impacted by their policies. And through no fault of their own, most legislators who are not assigned, or who are assigned to the Agriculture Committee, do not have an agricultural background. Lots of them did not grow up on farms. They don't have a lot of experience working with active producers. They don't, in some cases, have a ton of background, and they're thrown into these situations where they're working on very complex agricultural issues. We saw this a lot with the specialty seed and canola issue. That required, we have been doing with our partners like OOC and Willamette Valley Specialty Seed Association, we've been doing a lot of education, because that issue requires a ton of knowledge about plant biology, honestly, to understand what good policy looks like in that space. And so we call on folks who are directly impacted, so impacted communities and farmers who are going to have to accommodate these new pieces of legislation in their everyday lives, to show, whether it's to show that this is amazing or that there are unintended consequences that we need to address. It's really important that the people most impacted are the ones raising their voices.
I think Sherilyn has their hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, you're muted, Sherilyn.
Sorry.
Oh, you're muted again.
How about now?
You're good.
Okay, sorry.
You're
I do
good.
have a question on topic, but I can come back later. I want to give others a chance to ask their questions if others have been wanting to ask or say something. No? Okay. Alice, I just wanted to ask you, so I'm a new recurring donor. I believe in what you guys do. Our organization is overcoming barriers to food security. We partner a lot with farmers who generously donate from farmers market what they don't sell, especially in those weeks that we had heat wave or severe weather, right? Through our work and advocacy, which don't ask me how we do that with a small team of 2 part-time staffers, that's also making meals and delivering it to people. We have met a lot of farmers, specifically in East County. We are not in a position to purchase locally grown produce because we don't have that funding. We ourselves are still looking for funding to stabilize our work, right? Because we're mostly individual donation funded. So I bring this up because as I continue to meet more food growers and family farms, those small farmers that you just described, I am wondering how many of your followers, the people that donate to you, is this membership based? I'm not familiar with that. Again, I'm new to FOF. how many of them are actually like what you described, those farmers? Because, we want them to know about, these priorities that you guys presented about today to be able to speak to these hearings that you mentioned. And I know they have limited bandwidth, right? Because they're doing everything as small farms, and then doing markets and CSA. So I'm curious about how many of them follow your newsletters, or perhaps recurring donors themselves, or do you have like is this a subscription base?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we our current active farmer member is defined loosely for us. It is people who have been highly engaged, are donating on a monthly basis, or have actively participated in our technical assistance programs. And right now, we don't ground truth whether or not someone who says they are a farmer is a farmer, because that would be maddening. And also, I don't want to invalidate someone's ability to grow and sell food for themselves, whether I call them a farmer or not. So our number right now is 1,600 of folks who identify themselves as a commercial farmer, are active in our programs, are active in our advocacy, or are current monthly donors. We do have a membership program, but that is just someone who gives $50 a year. That is not the same as that number. It's obviously a lot less, because the folks that we represent are often not in a position to donate. And so we decided it wasn't equitable for us to only count folks who give us money as our members. And so we came up with this way of gauging activism and activity in our programs. In terms of our communications reach, counting non-farmers, we have about 10,000 people on our email list, and our current farmer email list is 5,200. So whether or not everyone reads our emails all the time, I don't know. I don't even read our emails sometimes because, well, I write a lot of them and Brittany writes a lot of them, so I've seen it. But I know that is our number of active subscribers across the state. And those are all folks who have marked themselves as farmers. We also do have folks in every county of Oregon, although we fully admit that we have pockets of activity. We're very active in the Willamette Valley. We have a good number of active farmers in the Central Oregon region, and we have a growing number of active farmers in the Southern Oregon region, the Jackson and Josephine County area. But we do have folks in every county, although we have pockets that are more active than others.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I thought about it because, again, we do advocacy, we try, because we want to see these farmers, stick around, right? Like, we would rather have the funding to be able to purchase beautifully locally grown produce from farmers of Oregon, growers, than, get what is being mass farm, what do you call them? Factory farm,
Right.
from, these giant stores. But we're not in a position to really choose at this point. Someday we hope to get there. But meanwhile, I also recognize we have limited bandwidth for advocacy and keeping up with the bills. So I'm really glad that I am now engaged with you all. So I'm going to try to sustain this 2024.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, we should give a little shout out to this later on our blog and everything, but there was a bill passed last session that made it possible to donate meat processed in a custom exempt facility, and the rulemaking on that is happening in the next couple weeks. So you might be able to accept more locally processed meat donations legally in the future. So hopefully I'll send you some info on that when that rulemaking happens, and I look forward to seeing if it helps.
Yeah, I do read your newsletter, so I'll
great.
be on the lookout for that.
Thanks. All right. I know we are at time, and I didn't get to do